Good evening, I'm Dennis Ward. Welcome to APTN National News. Today was the 6th day of the Aisha Hudson inquest in Winnipeg. Hudson was shot and killed by a police officer after an alleged liquor mart robbery and high-speed chase on April 8th, 2020. Julia Ross reports.
3 of the 4 other youth who were in the Jeep Aisha Hudson was driving when she was shot and killed by police testified as witnesses Tuesday at the inquest into her death. The court stated that all youths must remain anonymous. The witnesses testified that they were scared and were reacting moment by moment. One said that earlier in the day, some of the group, including Hudson, used marijuana and cocaine, and that everyone in the vehicle had been drinking. Another witness testified that she was Hudson's best friend and that she knew something was wrong when all occupants of the Jeep had been removed except Hudson. She then continued and says Hudson was dragged into the middle of the road, and after a long time of officers doing CPR, a blanket was placed over her. She testified that she was punched in the face by an officer, and another stated that he felt their vehicle being rammed by an officer from behind during pursuit. Each youth says that before the incident, they had each been arrested and witnessed family or friends being arrested. When asked their recommendations to stop further tragedies from happening in the future, 2 witnesses said that it was unnecessary for Hudson to have been shot and there should have been other things done that day. Julia Ross, APTN National News, Winnipeg.
Thanks, Julia. First Nations police detachment was the target of a drive-by shooting in the early morning hours on Tuesday. The Manitoba First Nations Police Service says unknown individuals approached the detachment in Fisher River Cree Nation on an all-terrain vehicle and fired numerous shots, striking the building exterior and police vehicles on site. 2 officers were on duty inside the detachment at the time, but not injured. Investigators say there's no risk to the public and believe it was a targeted shooting. Fisher River Cree Nation is located 200 kilometers north of Winnipeg. A statement released by Chief and Council say they are deeply concerned by the shooting. The statement says, "We will not tolerate any attempts to intimidate or threaten our community, especially from drug dealers or any individuals trying to undermine the safety and well-being of our people. Fisher River Cree Nation remains steadfast in our ongoing battle against drugs and criminal activity in our community. Anyone with information is asked to call the Fisher River Detachment." It's been 6 weeks since 3 people were injured and 1 man was killed in the Big Island Lake Cree Nation, located in northwestern Saskatchewan, with still no arrests made in that incident. Now Saskatchewan RCMP have released a video hoping the public can identify the getaway vehicle for 2 suspects believed to be involved. Saskatchewan RCMP say they are looking for this white side-by-side all-terrain vehicle with a black roof that was driven by 2 suspects in connection with the fatal shooting on December 30th in Big Island Lake Cree Nation. 31-year-old Neil Wapistaquan was killed and 3 others, 2 teenagers and an adult male, were also wounded in the shooting. A dangerous person alert was issued for Big Island Lake Cree Nation and the surrounding area as RCMP searched for the 2 suspects. However, they have still not been found. RCMP say they know people do have information about the vehicle, including who the suspects are. They're urging anyone to come forward with information that can lead to the arrests. Big Island Lake Cree Nation is about 400 kilometers northwest of Saskatoon, near the Alberta border. A Mi'kmaq Nation north of Halifax is in the process of declaring a state of emergency. Sabaganagati First Nation leadership issued a statement responding to the escalating crisis of illicit drugs, addictions, and overdoses in the community. The statement says anyone who uses homes to sell, distribute, or facilitate the use of illicit drugs will be evicted. The community is supporting a $20,000 reward for any information that leads to an arrest and conviction of anyone selling drugs. Chief and Council stressed they are not targeting those struggling with addictions and seeking help. They just want safety and healing in the community. Registration under the Indian Act was the topic of discussion at a parliamentary committee on Tuesday. The Standing Committee on Indigenous and Northern Affairs was looking specifically at the Act's second-generation cutoff. Last year, the Senate Standing Committee on Indigenous Peoples amended Bill S-2. It would eliminate the second-generation cutoff on passing down status. The bill still needs to be passed in the House of Commons. Lori Doran is the Director General of Individual Affairs with Indigenous Services. She told the committee the government is committed to eliminating the second-generation cutoff, but needs to consult with communities to best determine the path forward.
So we're consulting not on whether to remove the second-generation cutoff. The government is committed to a solution. The consultation is how. So one-parent rule in perpetuity is one solution, like removing it, going back to what existed pre-1985 with just one registration category. But there are self-determined approaches that are both within and outside of the Indian Act.
APTN News recently spoke with a Greenlandic Inuk living in Canada about sovereignty, her homeland, and the U.S. threats of annexation. Sav Jonza brings us more.
Recent U.S. threats of annexing Greenland have stunted conversations around the territory's independence from Denmark. While many Greenlandic Inuit want sovereignty, Denmark provides their military defense, keeping them safe from foreign interference. It's a sticky situation to be in, says Tupangnak Kopek.
And what I feel as a Greenlandic Inuk that talks about independence for Greenland, this has been a little bit hard because the conversations have been a little bit put on hold now. But that's just how it is. And I don't think I can ever forgive Trump for that because we deserve these conversations.
Kopek was born and raised in Nuuk, Greenland, but has lived in Canada for the last 5 years. She shared the story of her homeland struggle during a keynote speech at a conference in Winnipeg.
Greenland, in my opinion, is one of the most peaceful places on Earth, and now is being discussed as a potential site of conflict. A place with no military on its own, a place centered around community, land, and survival. At some point, we even asked ourselves, is Greenland going to be the reason why there is World War III?
Kopek says family and friends living in Greenland were scared enough to consider fleeing their homes after their prime minister told them to prepare for a possible U.S. military invasion in January. She says over the last year, fears around U.S. interests in Greenland have changed the course away from independence.
I noticed our last election, a party that usually isn't the biggest party, but the party that's one we know wants to stay connected to Denmark, won. They were the biggest party now, where they usually aren't, because people were like, now we need to stick together.
At the World Economic Forum, Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney said his country stands firmly with Greenland and Denmark. He did not mention Inuit. In February, Canada opened a consulate in Nuuk, one of the first countries to do so. More than 90 Inuit from Canada flew there to celebrate the milestone. Kopek says the relationship between Inuit in Canada and Greenland remains strong.
It was beautiful to see, like the whole plane filled with Canadian Inuit with the Greenlandic flag and the Canadian flag together. It really warmed my heart and just showed that we Inuit are one people, just separated by borders.
Kopek says Canada made one glaring mistake that could have acknowledged Inuit living in both countries. She says the consul should have been an Inuk.
Maybe it's hard to find someone right for the job, but I don't think so. There's so many amazing, smart Inuit up there.
Sav Jonza, APTN National News, Winnipeg.
The long-term impacts of flooding and hydro development in northern Manitoba is the focus of a legal case in court this week. We'll bring you details on that and more after the break. Welcome back. A Cree Nation from northern Manitoba is in federal court this week regarding the long-term impacts of flooding and hydro development. The Opaskwayak Cree Nation wants to put Canada on the hook for not protecting their livelihood. Here's T.R. Wheatley with the details.
Chief Michael G. Constant of the Opaskwayak Cree Nation debriefs with these high school students who made the trip to Winnipeg to sit inside a federal courtroom. Opaskwayak is challenging Canada in what they call the Four-Bay case. In court, Opaskwaяк's legal team hopes to prove the feds didn't do anything to protect Opaskwayak from Manitoba Hydro. At issue, the Grand Rapids generating station was built in the 1960s and located about 145 kilometers southeast of Opaskwayak on the banks of the Saskatchewan River next to the Pas. Jersey Young is one of those students in Winnipeg. She sat through testimony of elders, a mapping expert, and a historian so far, all of whom have spoke about the flooding impacts around Opaskwaяк's traditional territory.
We can't do the stuff that we used to do before, and I always wanted to go out in the land, but never really had the opportunity to.
The 17-year-old is hoping to graduate this year, and learning on the land has inspired her to become a conservation officer.
I'm just glad I was brought here by Mr. Cashel because he wanted us to learn about the land and how it's good to us and how we treat it.
Words that were also echoed by her classmate, Zach Harris.
It's been pretty interesting to learn about what's been happening with our land and our animals.
Seeing these youth engaged in Opaskwaяк's history is important for Chief Constant, who says this case gathered decades worth of research, academic, land-based, and history from its own members, all of which Constant says can prove the direct link of the damage from the dam on Opaskwaяк's livelihood.
We were rich with family, we were rich with food, we were rich with land. Today, we eat off the shelves of corporations, of the corporate community, where diabetes is high now. That wasn't the case when pre-Grand Rapids Dam. So you see the severity of the impacts of how this has caused livelihoods in generations to come.
But these kids aren't the only ones who can benefit from the Four-Bay case. Constant says many Indigenous communities face legacy impacts from major infrastructure projects.
For the next 6 weeks, I encourage the members of the urban area to come and listen in, because it's a file that's been decades and decades of information.
This traditional drumming ceremony opened the trial earlier this week, a trial that is expected to have expert witnesses for the next 6 weeks. T.R. Wheatley, APTN National News, Winnipeg.
A First Nation in British Columbia has developed a new subdivision with houses that were intended for demolition until a new partnership was created. APTN's Tina House has more.
What started as a chance encounter at a coffee shop has now led to this newly created subdivision for the Seashelt First Nation. It started with just 10 homes and then became 17, completely renovated and repurposed, with families now proudly living in them.
Within our community, we had over 200 people on our housing list, and a majority of our people are living sometimes 2-3 families in one house. So for them now to be able to have their own place all to themselves and their children to have their own place, it is quite truly amazing.
However, it wasn't an easy task to make this happen. These homes were intended for demolition after the city of Port Moody bought the homes to make way for a new SkyTrain line. The CEO of Renewal Development, Glenn Lewis, saw an opportunity and devised a plan to relocate and repurpose these homes alongside developer Dean Johnson of West Group. The houses were then lifted onto semi-trucks and then loaded onto barges. Those barges were then towed to their new location in Seashell, BC, on the Sunshine Coast. Local tradesmen and women from the nation were hired to renovate and rebuild the newly redesigned homes into modern showpieces. Glenn Lewis says the project is being recognized worldwide.
It caught the attention and it's mobilized the imagination of architects and developers and decision makers around the world now. So I think everybody who's had a hand in building this, everybody who's had a hand in helping to move this forward, should take some pride today to know that we've done something visionary, we've done something bold, we've done something that's going to hopefully prove the possibilities of sustainable development.
Band counselor Kenneth Jewell says he's emotional thinking about what these new homes mean for his nation members.
You know, talking to those who have moved into these homes and, you know, hearing the happiness from them. You know, my daughter has her own room, my son has his own room. You know, my nation members coming up to our administration office and coming to thank, you know, chief and council, and, you know, breaking down in tears that they are so happy for, you know, what they now have. So it's, you know, it hits the heart, you know, the happiness that I'm hearing from my people.
I would say to other nations, if there's a will, there's a way. There's always a way to get homes to our communities, and we know that so many of our Indigenous communities are struggling with a lack of homes. So this is one way of getting homes into your community.
And here on this newly created street called Smiley, which means Wild Man of the Woods, the Sechelt First Nation intends to build 94 more homes in this newly created subdivision. Tina House, APTN National News, Sechelt.
Thanks, Tina. A health authority is crucial for governing, planning, and delivering healthcare services. But the Yukon is one of only 2 jurisdictions in Canada without one. After years of work to develop a health authority alongside First Nations, the new Yukon government says they plan to hit pause on that work. As Sarah Connors tells us, First Nations in the territory are now calling on the government to reverse its decision.
In 2024, the former Liberal government unveiled its plan for a health authority to be developed in collaboration with First Nations.
We're at the cusp of something amazing in Yukon, and I think we all need to work together.
The Yukon is one of only 2 jurisdictions in Canada without a health authority. But last week, the new Yukon Party government informed First Nations it plans to pause the authority and possibly scrap the legislation altogether.
Yukon First Nations are, myself included, extremely disappointed.
The chair of the Chiefs Committee on Health calls the move a slap in the face. She says the authority would transform healthcare in the territory, especially for Indigenous people, by centralizing care, addressing systemic racism, and improving cultural safety.
It was legislation we drafted in good faith, objectively to address the many barriers that we are confronted with when approaching or accessing healthcare services in Yukon.
We just had concerns with the structure and the costs associated with this healthcare authority.
But Yukon's premier says the authority came at a high cost, with up to $70 million needed to transfer healthcare workers' pensions. He says the government still intends to continue policy work developed under the authority aimed at improving healthcare for First Nations people.
We've heard those concerns, and so we're going to maintain that structure as it is right now and try to find ways to improve it going forward.
But Frost says it's not that easy, and the work done to this point can't simply be moved elsewhere. She says First Nations are now considering establishing their own central healthcare facility and possibly taking legal action.
They chose a path forward that we're not going to stand down from. We're not going to let them go ahead and say, oh, well, all this work that you've participated in is all for nothing. We're not prepared to have a conversation with you.
The Yukon government says it will consider repealing the health authority legislation this fall. Sarah Connors, APTN National News, Whitehorse.
Thanks, Sarah. Time for one last break, and then we'll take you to an economic forum in Thunder Bay. Stay with us. Welcome back. Time now for our photo of the day. Colton Welsh sent in Winnipeg got a picture of some local deer, surprisingly becoming a common thing to see wandering through the city. Thanks for the picture, Colton. You can send your pictures to share at aptn.ca for the chance to be our next photo of the day. Now let's take a look at tomorrow's weather forecast. Starting on the East Coast, 0 for Fredericton, +1 with flurries for Halifax. -16 in Kuujjuaq, snow, and -6 for Nain. 2 below in Montreal, sun's out, and -5 for Chibougamau. -4 for Sault Ste. Marie, cloudy, and 2 below for Ottawa. -2 under sunny skies in Thunder Bay, 6 below for Sioux Lookout. -8 with the sun out for God's Lake, 3 below for the Paw. -1 in Winnipeg, cloudy, and 0 for Dauphin. -2 for Regina, sunny and 6 above in Swift Current. -3 for Meadow Lake and Buffalo Narrows. In northern Alberta, sunny and 5 above for Grand Prairie, +1 under sunny skies for Peace River. 0 for Edmonton, sunny and 9 above for Lethbridge. 8 in Vancouver, +3 for Kamloops. -1 for Prince George, 3 above in Smithers. -30 for Old Crow, 31 below for Rock River. -19 in Yellowknife, 0 for Fort Liard. -45 for Sax Harbor, 42 below for Pawlatuck. -19 in Chesterfield, 33 below for Cambridge Bay. -32 in Resolute, 30 below in Arctic Bay. Organizers of a Northern Ontario Economic Development Forum and Trade Show are celebrating their largest attendance figures to date. The Thunder Bay event is in its 3rd year and has been serving as a meeting place for First Nations leadership, entrepreneurs, and businesses from various sectors. APTN's Mike McDonald reports.
And the ability to start.
The 3rd annual Nigania Shawin comes at a time when the potential for economic growth is front of mind for many First Nations leaders and companies with business interests in the North. Event coordinator JP Gladue says a wide cross-section of industry and Indigenous leadership is represented here.
Biocarbon, biochar, biogasification, mining, northern stores, you name it. The Indigenous leadership that's being showcased here in Northern Ontario is attracting a lot of the business developers, the project proponents, as well as supply chains in the region that are looking to find ways to partner with Indigenous businesses and communities.
Rep Gawaden Security was one of the first sponsors of the event.
It's been amazing to watch it grow over the last 3 years. It gives us an opportunity to make connections, especially with some of the First Nation communities, which we're trying to do. And the more exhibitors we see is more opportunities.
Another company taking part is North Star Air, which is looking to deepen its connections with Northern Ontario communities.
Here to promote, obviously, our business, how we connect the communities of the North. Our new hangar that we built this past June in Thunder Bay. We're really excited about that. Just happy to be here and network with all the community members and businesses.
Gladue, meantime, says with the potential for boom times in Northern Ontario, now's the time to plan.
Northern Ontario is poised for some significant growth, but we got to get the relationships right, and that's what this conference is about, is helping establish stronger relationships, business relationships, to advance our projects in concert together so that we can extract the most that we can out of the work in this region with Indigenous leadership.
More than 400 people attended this year's gathering, representing over 50 First Nations communities. Over 130 businesses took part from various sectors, including transportation, communications, and construction. Mike McDonald, APTN National News, Thunder Bay.
Thanks, Mike. That's all the time we have for your APTN National News for this Tuesday. You can find more over on our website, aptnnews.ca. Creason will be here at 1 p.m. Eastern Time tomorrow. I'm Dennis Ward. Marcy Miigwech. Have a good night.